Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us on this wonderful Thursday evening. I can see quite a few of you who have started trickling in. We have a very, very exciting session brought to you today by the University of California, Irvine. For those of you who have just tuned in, very quickly in the chat window, if you could let us know which city are you dialing in from. We really like to know where our participants are coming in today for the masterclass. So to all 50 plus of you who are uh, in the chat window very quickly which city in India or from abroad, any other country, where exactly are you dialing in from? This would also serve as an audio and video check for me so that I know that you guys can hear me clearly. So we have Gargi from Jaipur. Hi, Gargi. Thank you so much for joining us. If y'all could just keep it flowing. This Tanay from Mumbai, a lot of people from Mumbai. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful Thursday evening. I know the rains are going on in Mumbai today, but yes, we have Saad from Delhi. Thank you so much, Saad. Uh, uh, Quite a few more people from Mumbai. And like I said, very, very exciting session for you today. We are going to be talking about bias in generative AI, which is brought to you by the University of California, Irvine, located in Southern California, in the heart of Orange County's tech coast. So a lot of cutting edge businesses, a lot of big tech giants in the area. You have Amazon, you have Google, you have Western Digital, plus a lot of savvy firms like the Capital Group, Disney, Hyundai, Pacific Life, and let's not forget Taco Bell. So yeah, to all those of you who are planning to study in the USA, today is going to be a power packed session in which we have a faculty, Professor Abhishek from the University of California, Irvine, who will be talking about the biases in AI tools such as ChatGPT. A lot of you I know now have started using AI like ChatGPT. You have AI on your WhatsApp, AI on Instagram, across all social media. And as these tools become a part of our everyday life, uh, Professor will explain why is it important to recognize and reduce biases in them so that AI can be fair and useful to everyone to help us create a more inclusive future as such. I'm going to leave the rest of it to Professor to talk about during his presentation. Very quickly to introduce the panel, my name is Sabahat Herzog. I'm the Associate Director with Seed Global Education. We are a UK headquartered company which facilitates interactions between top global universities like the one here with us today and prospective students like yourself, giving you a chance to connect with faculty of these institutes, giving you a chance to connect with the admissions team here and help make informed choices about your study abroad career. Joining me, of course, is Professor Abhishek. Thank you so much for joining us, Prof.
That's
He
about,
is,
yeah. Great to be here.
Thank you. He's an associate professor of information systems at the Paul Merage School of Business, University of California, Irvine. His research focuses on the effect of emerging technologies on consumer behavior, business strategy, and market structure. He's received a PhD in operations and information management and an MA in statistics from the Wharton School, University of Pennsylvania. And he also holds a BTech in computer science from IIT Kanpur. Now, how many of us here don't know this institute? So thank you so much, Professor, once again for joining us. I'm sure it's going to be a very power-packed session. Students are going to be excited. Along with Professor, we also have Jana. Hi, Jana, who is the Program Director of Recruitment and Admissions for the Specialty Masters program at the University of California, Irvine's Paul Merage School of Business. She oversees recruiting strategies, enrollment management, and marketing for a lot of their master's program. She is also an alumni of the University of California, Irvine, and has earned her MBA from University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. So thank you so much, Jenna, for joining us. And thank you, all of you. I can see we have more than 200 students who have already joined in. So before I sort of hand it over to Professor, I'm going to quickly run my first poll question for this evening, which is on the screen in front of you. Since we are talking about AI and biases, do you think AI technologies are currently fair and unbiased? For those of you who feel yes, that they are mostly fair, you could cast your vote. For those of you who feel no, there are many biases. And of course, there are those who could say that they are not too sure. And in today's masterclass, we will try and broaden your horizons a little bit. So, very quickly on the screen in front of you, the first poll question for this evening: Do you think AI technologies, which we are using currently in some form or the other in our day to day activities, are fair and unbiased? I'm going to keep the poll open for a couple of more seconds before I end it and show off the results. So, anyone else who would like to sort of cast the vote, please go ahead and do so. Great. With that, I'm going to quickly end the poll and show the questions and share the results. So it's a very close match. I would say 38% are unsure, 32% feel no, there are many biases, and 30% feel that yes, they are mostly fair. So, fairly divided group, Professor. I'm sure this makes it more exciting for you to
Yeah.
speak more on the topic. With that, I now hand it over to Professor Abhishek to take it ahead with his
Thank you
presentation.
so much, Sabhat. Glad to be here. I think a lot of people showing up for the talk. Not as popular as the Coldplay concert that's going to be there, I think, in the next couple of weeks in Mumbai. But I can live with this, right? I think welcome to all of you, and really excited to be talking to everyone. It's interesting. I think I love the sort of distribution of the poll results, which shows that people are kind of on the fence in terms of whether generative AI has bias or not. So not surprisingly, because there is a talk on bias in generative AI, definitely there's going to be some bias that we're going to talk about in today's talk. So very quickly, this is joint research with one of my PhD students who's now a professor at University of British Columbia, and a few of my former colleagues at Carnegie Mellon. And I'm sure all of you have heard about generative AI and the potential of generative AI. So I do a lot of work in this area. I've been working in AI and machine learning for over like 25 years. Uh, like Sabat mentioned, I did my undergrad in computer science from IIT Kanpur, then did my PhD from Wharton. And then I was a professor at Carnegie Mellon for several years before I moved to sunny Southern California. Uh, I've also worked very closely with many companies, and I started a generative AI company a couple of years back before it was cool, maybe a year before ChatGPT. So I run this company called Altius that's creating generative AI assistants for the enterprise. Uh, so, I think the last 2 years, generative AI is pretty much what everyone is talking about. It's in the news every day. I think there was something with OpenAI going on yesterday with the CTO leaving the company. So it's like you can almost make a movie on what's going on with OpenAI and generative AI in general. But if you take a step back, generative AI is fundamental change in technology and can have a very big impact on the overall economy, right? So there's a study by McKinsey that says that the overall economy can grow by up to 70% because of what generative AI has to offer, right? And that's a very, very big statement, given that the overall growth in the world economy is of the order of 3 to 4% year on year, right? So if some technology can fundamentally change that to 70%, that's a huge increase in the productivity. Just to give you context, only a few times this has happened in the past. So, with the coming of the Industrial Revolution, with the coming of the internet, so we are looking at the precipice of the next wave of change that can really dramatically alter how everything is done in the workspace and in the labor market. So very fascinating time to be alive and really looking at working in this area, especially for people who are interested in a career in MSBA. You will be really in the midst of everything that's to come. I've done a lot of work in marketing, and so I do want to sort of contextualize this in the context of marketing. Uh, People have been using generative AI for a long time, probably for the last 5, 6 years. It might not, some of you might not be aware, but generative AI has been around for a few years, even before ChatGPT happened. So there have been companies like Jasper that advertising agencies have been using to create ad copies and whatnot. Uh, Now we have had image generation models, which is where our paper is going to focus on. in terms of creating ad copies or images that people can use in their campaigns. Of course, email campaigns is a very common use now. We do some of this at Altius. And then eventually personalization, right? One of the biggest opportunities with generative AI is you can personalize to a segment of one. I can look at all the information, for example, that Jana has, or I have on Jana as on Amazon, and I can personalize the email that I'm sending out to Jana, the marketing email that I'm sending out to her based on all her transaction records, right? And that level of personalization was just not possible even 2 or 3 years ago. So really fascinating time for what's been happening with generative AI and specifically in the context of marketing. However, what we want to look at is there bias in generative AI? And the reason that we are interested in this problem is given how pervasive these technologies are going to be in the future, we need to be ahead of the curve. That's what we do in academia. We try to be ahead of what people are doing in the industry and inform practice. So we want to look at is there bias in generative AI, especially in the context of image generation, and then what is the nature of these biases, and what are the consequences of these biases, right? So as uh, more and more marketers start using generative AI programs to create ad copies, uh, are they biased in a certain direction that can affect consumer behavior? And then we want to look at is that bias detrimental to consumers or not detrimental to consumers, and how do we eventually correct for those biases? I'll not get bore you with literature review, but I think all of you must have heard with AI to text image generators like Midjourney, DALI 2. Now we have DALI 3, Stable Diffusion. There are a bunch of these image generators that keep coming up in the market, but these are the most popular ones that are used commercially. So we'll just focus our study on that. We have replicated this for some of the new image generators, and we sort of see similar issues in the new ones too. So let me talk a little bit about how does image generation work, right? Text to image generation work. So you put in a text like this, a corgi playing a flame, throwing trumpet. This is a text, we call this a text context. This then gets converted into an internal representation. So we take a bunch of text, represent this in an internal representation, and this is what we call a clip encoder. These are, again, some of the things that you will learn here in the program. And so that's creating a high dimensional representation of what this sentence means at a very, very abstract level, right? So we have a long vector. We don't know what the weights of those vector mean, but we have taken all these images or all these texts in the past and sort of converted them to images and created a representation for those images. Now, once we have that representation, we pass that to uh, a diffusion model that then starts from that description and then tries to generate this image of a corgi playing a trumpet, right? Again, too much detail to get into in a 30-minute talk. But the idea is you can take any piece of text and generate an image that's corresponding to that, right? I'm sure all of you have played around with some kind of image generation models at Midjourney or DALI or whatever. Um, and it's really fascinating how we can generate this. And what's even more fascinating is, you know, maybe even a year ago when you used to do image generation, you'll have images that had like 7 fingers and weird hands and whatnot. But even in just 1 year, the technology has come a long way, and it's very, very effective, and it's being used very popularly in the market. I'm going to skip this just in the interest of time, but I want to show you how this process progresses, right? So if I give a prompt like thank you, for example, in Midjourney, I mentioned that once we create the internal representation, the way the algorithm works is it starts with a diffused prior. It starts from a noise and then sort of tries to gravitate towards the weights that have assigned in the prior that I give to the model, right? And so progressively, starting from just this text sentence that then converts it into some kind of a representation, it generates this first image. Then progressively, given the context that I'm providing to the model, it then generates the final image, right? So it sort of goes through steps of, adding noise. This is how we sort of call it in machine learning. We're adding noise to the process based on the prior that's given here, and then it eventually generates this final image that you can use for various different purposes. Now, what we did was we used these models to give it a prompt, right? So I'm sure all of you have done prompt engineering in generative AI in ChatGPT. So very similarly in image generation, you can do prompt engineering. Here we had a very, very simple prompt. The prompt that we used was saying a portrait of X, where X was different professions, right? And these professions that we used were professions that were in the ONET database. So the ONET database is a US database that has all the different high-level professions that people engage in, right? This is created by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is what determines the labor market and does a lot of analytics on that. So we have about 1,000 occupations in the ONET database, and we just went to all these different image generation models, and I said, "Oh, generate a portrait of uh, actuaries, bakers, cardiologists, dancers, so on and so forth." And we generated 8 images per prompt, so total of about 8,000 images. And then we analyzed. So I'm going to give you some examples of images that we generated, right? So this is a portrait of financial advisors. This is a portrait of chief execs, portrait of chefs and head cooks, portraits of food preparation workers, portrait of surgeons, portrait of dishwashers, portrait of economists, portrait of brokerage clerks. And I think by now you probably have figured out the problem that I'm going to point out in these images, right? Uh, Most of them are men, and most of them are, Caucasian men in these images. So what we did was we built another model, computer vision model, that looked at these images and tried to find out what's the proportion of men versus women, what's the proportion of different races in these images. So we could have gone and manually tagged these images, but there are 8,000 images. They would have taken a long time to tag. So what we ended up doing was we built a computer vision model that looked at each face in an image and then tried to classify this as a male or female. It tried to classify along different genders, right? And then we also look at emotions and many other factors that I'm going to talk about later. But essentially, we're using machine learning to analyze these different images and find out their properties. So now let's talk about the results, right? So we had three data sets. What we find in general is the proportion of males is significantly higher than the percentage of females, right? Now, just at a high level, that's problematic because if you look at the US labor market, the proportion is almost equal, right? Men versus women representation is almost equal. So the fact that uh, we are seeing very different percentages of male versus female in these data sets is problematic. Uh, so all three image generators are biased against women. However, the extent of the bias depends upon the training data and the algorithm used to create the AI. So if you look at Midjourney, which is one of the most popular and probably one of the best image generation models out there, the extent of the bias is significant, right? You have 80%, close to 80% male, and only 20% females. I think the situation is a little bit better for DALI, where the bias is not as significant at 60 to 40, but still there is an issue with all of these models. And I think if we look at the newer models too, we see very similar results. Uh, Now we try to sort of slice and dice this data along several different dimensions. So we looked at this huge discrepancy that we see at a high level, but we try to see how is that across different types of jobs. So there is a classification of jobs uh, from the owner data set, and it's classified into different job zones, all the way going from 1 to 5. Uh, One is jobs that don't require any amount of training or very little training. So education required for something like that would be a high school diploma, or maybe no education at all, right? Whereas if you look at a job zone 5, it requires extensive experience, right? So you need a PhD or a master's degree to do these kinds of jobs. So think about professors, for example, or pharmacists, or lawyers, or astronomers. And so, as you go across the job zones from 1 to 5, the level of education or training required increases, but also consequently the income increases, right? So for job zone 1, the average income is $30,000, whereas if you look at job zone 5, the median income is about $82,000. So what we did was we looked at across the different models, how does this bias change as we go through different job zones, right? So if you look at mid journey, the situation is pretty much the same. It's kind of bad till we get toward job zone 5, but the bias is not as much, right? I think we see similar results for stable diffusion, right? That overall, I think there is a strong bias against women, but as we progressively go across the job zones, it becomes slightly better over time. Only in DALI 2, we sort of saw that, it's actually flipped in job zone 5. I think for all the other job zones, we still have this problem. But job zone 5, we see that women are more represented in these images than men, right? And just to give you context, if you look at the data from Bureau of Labor Statistics, the split is actually half and half, right? Almost half and half across all of these different job zones, right? So it's not like this is a representation of what's happening in society. It's really that these models are biased to what is reality. Now, one can argue that there is bias in real world too, but I think this bias is even more significant than the bias in the real world. Then we also look at bright outlook occupations. These are occupations where uh, they're supposed to flourish in the next decade or so. So, jobs that have a strong prospect. So, programmers or data scientists, for example, I think something that you all must be very interested in. So these jobs have a very positive outlook in the future. And so then we look at how does the distribution vary across these types of jobs. And we see that again, in the bright outlook occupation, the situation is a little bit better. So I think the silver lining here that we find is, of course, there is bias, but the bias is slightly reduced uh, for jobs where they are more attractive in terms of how much you get paid, or jobs that are more attractive because there's a future prospect. So the bias is, I wouldn't say it's gone, but it's significant. It's reduced to some extent in some of these models. Uh, Now, uh, just doing a quick time check. Uh, we do this by STEM occupations. We see similar results. We see that the bias in STEM occupation is a little bit less than the general population, but not by much. Now, all this time I've been talking about men versus women, but of course, in a diverse country like the US, there are many races that are represented, and sort of we'd want to look at how does the bias manifest along racial lines. And again, you can clearly see here that, if you look at most of these models, they are biased towards uh, uh, Caucasians or white. And then, interestingly, if you look at stable diffusion, it has predominantly Asians, right? And this all depends upon the data set that these models are trained on. Uh, so we definitely see that other populations are underrepresented. So African Americans or Middle Eastern or Asians for some of these models are less represented than they need to be in the population. I'm going to talk about that and reference data from other sources. But generally, you see that not only is the bias prevalent along gender, but it's also very, very apparent along racial lines, which is again a problem, right? If you're generating images for sending out marketing copies, and if they tend to rely heavily on a particular type of population, one, it changes public perception, but also these advertising, these ads might not be very effective because people who are seeing that might not resonate with the individual that they're seeing in those images, right? So I think that's a big challenge. So what we did was we tried to benchmark this with Bureau of Labor Statistics. I just talked about that earlier. So Bureau of Labor Statistics collects all of this labor market data in the US. And so, that's the representation of reality, so to speak, right? And if we look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, as I mentioned earlier, the split is almost half and half, right? Half women do half the jobs and men do half the jobs in the US, right? That's the labor market participation. And now, of course, for India, that's very different, right? It's predominantly men who are in the workforce and not as many women, right? So this ratio might differ from one country to another. But if you look at the other thing that we did as a benchmark was because these models are trained on internet data, we went and looked at uh, what images do we find for a similar search, like, search for a portrait of actuaries on Google, what do we actually end up getting? So we looked at that, and it's not as sort of fair or as equitable as what we see in BLS, but very close to that, right? Along gender lines. And if you compare that to all of these different models, we see that clearly these models are very, very biased based on what is reality. And I do want to highlight the fact that these models are biased compared to what's real. The real world can be biased too, which we all know is biased. But even compared to that, not so great equitable benchmark, we see that these models are even worse. If you look at gender lines, I think uh, it's bad. So this is the if you look at African Americans, you can have similar charts for other races. The labor market participation is about 15%, which is also roughly the population of African Americans in the US population. Uh, but if you look at all of these models, there's just zero representation of African Americans in these, right? So very big issue. Uh, if you look at Google, I think Google is biased too, right? So not surprising, Google is biased in this, right? So maybe Google has done something specific around trying to address gender issues in their image search models, but definitely along race lines, they have not sort of figured this out. Uh, so then we sort of looked at one more angle of these image generation models. We looked at emotions, right? So what emotions are people representing, are people showing in these images? So let me just go back and show that to you visually, right? So these, if you look at men versus women in these images, I'll sort of let you linger and uh, look deeply. If you look at, there aren't very many women anyway, so I think it's difficult to make that point from these images. But when we actually analyzed all these 8,000 images and found out that there's a big difference in how men are represented versus how women are represented. So I'll just talk about two high-level dimensions because we're almost at time. Uh, if you look at the average age, it's about 47 years for men in these images, whereas women are relatively younger so maybe in the mid 30s in these images. When you look at what kind of emotion are they representing, most women are more likely to be smiling in these images as not, right? Now, why does this matter, right? Uh, Men are older in these images, women are younger. Men are more serious, women are less serious or more smiling in these images. Why does it matter? There has been a lot of research in psychology that looks at how people are perceived based on images. And very strongly, there are these indicators that show that older people are given more respect. So some, like if you look at two images, and you have, uh, for example, marketing message where you have the copy of an older person versus a younger person. The older person is supposed to be more authoritative, and you're more likely to believe something that's coming from an older person. And similarly, if someone is uh, more stern in their outlook, you tend to give them also more authority, right? So not only is the bias in terms of how many women are represented in this data, but also along how they're represented in the data, right? And similarly, I think this holds true for racial lines also. So there is an explicit bias that we can measure uh, along gender, along races, but there are also this implicit bias where different types of individuals are represented very differently, right? And that also challenges or undermines their authority as in these images that they're represented in, right? We can sort of look at many different emotions, anger, disgust, fear, happiness. But in general, I think this feeling is reinforced that men, on one hand, women are expressed more happier across all generators. Men, on the other hand, are either express neutral emotions or anger. And again, if you put two and two together, all the psychology research in this area, it shows that in these generation models, that's a double whammy, right? Women are represented less, and also when they're represented, they are under their authority is undermined as opposed to men, right? And sort of very similar results we see across racial lines. So the bias is real, it exists. Now, how do we address the bias, right? One way of addressing the bias is saying, in the prompt itself, we can try to do some things like say, okay, represent a portrait of doctors that do not have any gender bias, right? So there are some high level issues, some high level ways in which we can address this issue. But the challenge remains that, you know, we can only address those issues if we are aware of the bias, and we can only address this at a high level, right? So we can sort of talk about gender bias, we can talk about racial bias, but then there are other implicit biases that we talked about earlier, like, how women are represented versus men are represented, right? Even if you look at this image here, the women are more happier and smiling than the men. The men look more gruff, right? So until you're aware of this fact, you're not going to be able to correct for that in the prompt, right? And there are many such subtle differences that occur, right? That represent people differently. So the point here is these images are really biased. We have to not stop using them, but be aware of these biases and then figure out how they impact uh, users and how we can overcome these biases. So this is some research that we are working on currently and extending this research. So I'll just conclude now because I'm at time. So our study shows that there are many biases that these image generation models have. Uh, this bias is not only pervasive at a very high level in terms of gender and racial lines, but it's also present in more implicit ways that we would not have imagined. And then we should prioritize as a consequence how to bring more inclusiveness into these images, and inclusiveness and diversity in these images that are image generators that are getting more and more popular. So I'll just pause there. Happy to answer your questions offline or towards the end. And now I think I'll hand it over to Jana to talk about other cool things about the school.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Abhishek. That was really, really insightful, even for me. So much to learn about, the biases that AI does present. If you could, I would request you to stop sharing your screen so that
Yeah,
we could get Jana on the screen. Uh,
sure.
Quite a few students who are here. I would really encourage all of you to please post your questions in the Q&A box. We will be taking them up shortly after Jana is done with her presentation. With that, I would now like to run my second poll question for this evening, which is going to be on the screen in front of you. So quickly to everyone in the audience, which of the following programs are you keen to pursue? Are you looking to pursue a master's in finance? Are you someone who's interested in the Masters of Innovation and Entrepreneurship? Are you someone who's more inclined towards a master's of professional accountancy? Are you someone who's interested in Master of Science in Business Analytics or a Master's of Science in Biotechnology Management? Or are you looking to pursue a full-time MBA, a flexible MBA, or with someone who's come in with a lot of years of experience in executive MBA? So very quickly, on the screen in front of you, let us know which of the following programs would you be really interested in pursuing. The options are right there. I am going to keep this poll running for another minute or two before I sort of end it. So very quickly, on the screen in front of you, which of the following programs are you keen on pursuing? It will really help us get an idea as to what exactly is it that you are looking for. And for those of you who have just sort of tuned in, please feel free to post your questions in the Q&A box. We will be taking up those questions as soon as Jana is done with her presentation, where she is going to be talking a lot more about these programs, about the options available at the university, funding, scholarships, and all of the information. With that, I'm going to quickly end the poll and share the results, which are on the screen in front of you. A close majority is looking at a Masters of Finance and a Masters of Innovation and Entrepreneurship, followed by a full-time MBA and some other programs. So to all those of you who participated in the poll, thank you so much. I am now going to hand it over to Jenna to take us through her presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'll go ahead and share my presentation. Okay. Hopefully everybody can see this. Hi, everyone. Welcome from wherever you're calling in here in sunny Southern California. It's actually really early on a Thursday morning, but my name is Jana Cheng. I am the Programs Director of Recruitment and Admissions for our specialty master's programs, and I'll be going over our Merage portfolio for those of you that are learning about the University of California, Irvine. I like to kind of title this session Empowering Tomorrow's Leaders because the really interesting thing about our school is that we're young. We're a young university and we're always learning and growing. We're a research university. So if you guys have learned about the University of California Irvine system, it's a public school system where we really are focusing on growing technology as well as growing leaders in the professions. I love the fact that we had a masterclass on AI because it's something that, as Professor mentioned, it's talked about every single day. It's infusing in all of our lives, and we as a university are not shying away from that. And we'll get to that a little bit when I talk a little bit more about our university. Okay. So one thing I always love to start with is just where we're located. If you guys don't know, we are in California, but we're in Southern California. Something that is known for our reputation is that we are America's #1 safest city, 17 years in a row. It's really important for us in terms of community and family to be in a really safe environment. We're also, if anybody's heard of Silicon Valley and the tech coast, Orange County and Southern California is considered like the Southern California tech coast. As we mentioned in the very beginning, we do have Amazon and Google and Western Digital and amazing firms that students get to work with. We talk about capstone projects that you get real world experience, and that's built through because we have access to all of these companies. And I cannot go without saying about the weather. I know it's something that is really important to have a kind of comfortable living environment. It averages around 23 degrees Celsius, which is around like 75 degrees Fahrenheit. And it's something that we love in the sense that we can kind of mix the indoor and outdoor activities and really take use of the location that we're in. Okay. A little bit more about our university. One thing I actually did want to highlight is at the bottom corner, you'll see that there's a $7 billion annual economic impact in Orange County. I think it is really, really important when you're looking and researching schools that you understand that the US is a really large country, but it is really important to know that the hubs that are existing in the states or in the environments Orange County alone sometimes represents larger economies than full countries. And that is a benefit to us and to our students because we foster idea generation, we foster hiring, and it really goes a long way into the relationships that you get to build when you're selecting a graduate program or investing in your future. I encourage anybody to kind of search and say, the top companies in Irvine, and you'll see this amazing list of headquartered companies in so many different areas. So not only is it technology, but it's also healthcare, it's gaming. Like Blizzard Entertainment is down the street from us. If anybody's into like video gaming systems, there's so much that we'd like to make sure that students understand that is just around the corner and that they get access to. Something that I also really, really want to share about is kind of the mission and vision of our school. So you'll see in the VR headsets, that's actually our dean, Dean Ian Williamson. He's embracing the use of technology. He wants us to build and teach leaders for industry. And so we are incorporating AI technologies throughout our curriculum, but really making sure that the environment that we're hosting for students that are in our schools is the top notch. So we're embracing the curriculum that students are teaching, but infusing it from our undergraduate classes all the way through our grad school. And also, when you're choosing a business school, we also really embrace kind of the diversity that we have here in Southern California. This means inclusive excellence, where individuals should understand that they have a home, they have a place here at UCI. So the mission that we have is to make sure that when you come, you're able to find resources and feel like you have a voice and representation at our school. I love this slide. We just added it in, and it's a little bit more about some of the curriculum that's offered in our business school. There's going to be operations, analytics. There's going to be deep learning and applications. One of the most important things is to understand that AI is not going away, and you're gathering tools that are going to be useful in your future careers. So making sure that you have opportunities to learn and engage, regardless of whichever degree that you pursue. It is impacting every single area, and that's really important for us to be able to, no matter which program you select, to be able to cross-enroll students into these types of electives so that you have a really well-rounded education. Okay, I love the poll where you guys were showcasing which areas of programs that you're interested in. We do have two styles of programs. We have our MBA portfolio as well as our one-year master's programs, which are really concentrated in terms of the courses and curriculum, but I'll go a little bit deeper briefly over those programs. Oh, I also did want to showcase our rankings. It's something that we don't chase rankings, but it is kind of a verification of all of the hard work of the program office, of the school, of the investment. If everybody saw US News and World Report release their top public universities, and UC Irvine was ranked number 9, which we're really, really proud of as a school and institution. But our programs individually have also been recognized for their quality. The students that you're going to be surrounded by and learning in classrooms, they're also the top notch because we are very selective when it comes to those opportunities. Okay. As I mentioned, in terms of our inclusive excellence, we do have a lot of clubs and organizations. For our students, we do want to make sure that not only are you getting education, but you are also getting community. And there's clubs and organizations. If you would like to be a leader in your space, there's probably an area that you can grow. There's entrepreneurship clubs, there's women in business. There's a lot of different opportunities to become leaders in the school. Another highlight of our school is the personalization. So we are cohort-based in terms of our programs. We really do focus on groups and classwork together They're small to medium size in terms of the career plans, but they also have a really good professor to student ratio, as well as a flexible learning environment. Okay. So I'm going to have two separate slides where I'm talking first about the specialty master's programs and then a little bit later about the MBA programs. I want to say that the major difference between the two is work experience, and that's normally where we like to start conversations. If you're currently in an undergraduate program, know that it is possible to directly go into a graduate program where you're focusing in an area of study. For us right now, we have a finance program, an accounting program, business analytics, and innovation entrepreneurship. And these are full-time. You're really investing your full year into a program. You can get a capstone where you get actual work experience. We're really focusing on professional development. But the really nice thing is that career services is still integrated in the program and it's built into the curriculum. So you know that in a year, you can feel very prepared to kind of launch your career into the workspace. On the other hand, we do have a highly ranked full-time MBA program. It is STEM designated. We ask that you do have at minimum 2 years experience, but our average is around 3 to 6 years. In terms of the curriculum, we do pride ourselves on a lot of the focuses and concentrations that we do have. We are a tech hub, as I mentioned, but also we have emerging areas in healthcare, finance, real estate. If anybody's heard of the Irvine company, that's where we're located. It's a huge industry, as well as marketing, brand strategy. Our career center, we cannot explain enough how much investment we do have in our students and the career center working with you throughout your 2 years with us in the program. I would also like to say for those that are coming in and you have 10 plus years experience and you're really looking to invest in potentially C-suite positions for managers and executives, really taking you to the next level. There's also an executive MBA for professionals that would like to come to the Merage School as well. Okay. Now, when you're thinking, okay, what do I need to do to prepare myself? What is the Merage School looking for? We really do want to make sure that you present your best self. For us, we want to make sure that students are really showcasing their academics and making sure that you have a strong foundation. We want to see relevant experience. We want to see not only is it relevant experience, but that you're learning and growing and showing progression. Having a goal-minded or goal-oriented mindset is also extremely important. For us, the most successful students have very clear goals and they work and work and work into achieving those goals. And we're their partners. We're partners in this educational journey so that we can help you succeed in your future careers. So we do want to see all of this. We want you to know that this is a global program. We have so many students that are coming in, and that's really important for us that you also come in with that global mindset. Okay, I think I have 2 more slides and then I'll wrap up. This slide is something that we're really genuinely proud of. It's where our alumni are getting positions, and it showcases, honestly, the amount of networking and the ability to really launch and grow your careers in industry. As you can see, lots of different companies represented. I'm sure you recognize, more than all the brands that are listed here. Okay. The last thing I do want to wrap up with is talking a little bit more about what it looks like to apply. We do have application deadlines coming up if you are applying for fall of 2025. We have our application live right now. We're very happy that you took your time today to join the session, and so we are providing fee waivers for students. We have scholarships that are available to students that you actually don't have to have a separate application. A lot of times it's included as part of the overall review. For certain programs, we also have opportunities in regards to additional TA positions, and you can find all of that information in depth more through appointments with us as counselors, or it can be through our website as well. Okay. And with that, sorry, took a little bit longer, but that wraps up my presentation.
Thank you so much, Jenna. Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation and for sharing all of the information with us. That was very, very insightful. I can see quite a few questions which have sort of come in to the chat window. Professor, if we could have you back on camera as well, we would love to get started with the questions. And Lindsay, if you wish, you could also switch on your camera and come back on so we could all tackle these questions together. So, starting with the first question, there is someone in the audience who wants to know if someone comes from a business background, so a bachelor of commerce background, and they
Right.
want to learn more about AI to excel in the fields of finance or the business analytics field, what exactly is it that they can do to ensure that they are learning the right things and sort of using it in the right way?
Right. So, Jana, you want me to take that question? Awesome. So our school, one of the focuses of our school is digital leadership, and
Hmm.
that extends to all the different programs that we offer, whether it's an undergrad program, whether it's a MBA program, or even something that's more technical. I think the focus or how much we want to focus on different topics differs from one program to the other. But AI is a core part of a curriculum, and we have a lot of faculty, not only me, like many other faculty who are doing really cutting edge research in this area across finance, accounting, information systems, operations, all across the board. So that's definitely a core area of strength for us as a school, and we try to incorporate all of that in our programming. For example, I teach courses in the exec program and in the
Hmm.
MBA program that talk about this specific issue about how do you, not as a developer but as a business user, how do you use all of these techniques and technologies. In fact, the course is called AI for Business, which focuses on, as an end user, how do you go about leveraging these technologies, but also how do you
Right.
think about the changes they bring about in the market and be prepared for those changes and lead the pack in those changes in some sense.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor. That was very helpful. To all those of you who've just tuned in, we are also joined by Lindsay on the panel. Hi, Lindsay. Lindsay is the Associate Director of Recruitment and Admissions for the full-time MBA program at the UC Paul Merage School of Business. So thank you for the answer to that question. I'm going to quickly move on to the next one, which is from Kanada Verma, who wants to know what are the privacy, security, and ethical risks associated with AI, with the use of AI for an organization, and how can we potentially, avoid these issues and sort of build trust so that there is no issue that they face at an organizational level as opposed to just a personal level.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. We are all trying to wrap our head around it. And this is an issue that's not only true with generative AI. I think it's been an issue that's uh, been prevalent with AI in general. So there are a bunch of folks here, not only in the terms of the research that I'm doing, but also people at UCI overall,
Hmm.
who are looking at these problems of fairness in AI models. But I think this is a very active area of research. There are a few guardrails. I think there is now a few commercial ways of solving this problem. There are companies that provide these AI guardrails on
Right.
top of AI models. Uh, Companies like OpenAI are doing some things proactively to avoid the bias in these models. I think still a very long way to go. Uh, the whole privacy and ethical aspect of this is, again, very interesting, very open problem right now, to be frank.
True.
But
True.
also that creates a lot of opportunity to go and address these issues in meaningful ways, right? Something very simple as who owns the data is a
Right.
big issue, and if you train a generative AI model on that data, should you compensate the creators for this kind of using their data to train the models, right? And I think there was a New York Times lawsuit against OpenAI for using their data to train the models. I think
Mm.
the Supreme Court has ruled in favor of OpenAI, but I think this is, we'll see a series of these lawsuits coming up in the future. So I think these are areas that not only tech companies, but also, policy makers and regulators are trying to wrap their heads around. So very interesting time to
Yes,
be looking at these
true.
problems.
AI has become such a part of our life now that I think we can't live with and can't live without. We just have to ensure that we are sort of using it in the right way. Moving on to my next question, which I would sort of address to Lindsay and Jana. There is Akshay who's saying, I have a BCom degree. What do you recommend I prefer for before sort of taking that leap and taking that flight to the USA? So, to sort of generalize it and make it more open to the audience here, Jana, you spoke about the requirements that you sort of look for in a candidate when they are applying uh, to UC Irvine, Paul Mirage. But are there any additional courses or something else that a student can do which will really sort of help them stand out, instead of the normal requirement list which is sort of available for them to have that advantage, especially for those who are coming in for masters and don't have work experience or anything like that?
Yeah, of course. So I did just want to address that we do have a lot of students that are applying with a Bachelor of Commerce. If it is a 3-year degree, we
Yeah.
do actually require the additional year in the Masters of Commerce. And if you have any specific questions, we actually do internal evaluations of
Hmm.
transcripts, and we can actually help you out in that sense. But I did want to highlight the fact that our degrees are very quantitative based in terms of most of them are STEM designated. And so when you're looking at the types of skill sets we would like to see, it's definitely statistics. If you have any programming languages where it's relevant to the work that you want to do, we also encourage you to potentially get a data analytics certificate. But not only get the certificate, but actually explain how you've learned it and what you plan on using to apply it. We don't simply just want to see a line in your resume. It's
Correct.
really important for us to make sure that if we asked you, for example, in the interview, you would be able to elaborate on how that certificate is helping you achieve the goals that you are. So that's also really important, but statistics, Python, a little bit of
Okay.
programming languages always goes a really long way into showcasing those abilities.
Great. Thank you so much, Jenna. That was really helpful. And of course, to everyone out there, always helpful to take on some new courses, learn new things, and sort of put it to the right use. I'm going to take up my next question, which a few students have asked. Again, I'm going to sort of generalize it and ask more about the career opportunities which are available, especially for Indian students. A lot of them do look for return on investment. It's a huge investment, taking loans, taking other collateral before they sort of come to the US to study. So, what are the different kind of career opportunities that are available for them, and how does the school sort of help them in ensuring that they are getting the right kind of career opportunities?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. Obviously, I
Thank you,
work with
Lindsay.
MBA students, and the career team is heavily involved in their program. Specifically for full-time MBA, our career team starts working with our students over the summer before they even start the program to really kind of help them sharpen their resume, kind of really start highlighting their leadership, project management skills, getting them ready for that internship search that happens very early
Right.
on with full-time MBA. With our students from India, yeah, I mean, I definitely think there's a lot of fantastic opportunities being located in California specifically. We have a ton of alumni, as you saw,
Yes.
across the board when you think about Bay Area, LA, Orange County, and San Diego. We have a fantastic group of alumni working at all of those big brand companies. Something that I did want to highlight that our Career Center just did with our full-time MBA students, they took a group of students who were interested in tech, because that is a big focus of our school, up to the Bay Area. It's called the Bay Area Trek. And they take students up there that are interested in roles in tech, and they bring them to different companies. 4 of the companies I know they went to were Meta, Amazon, Walmart, and Autodesk were 4 of the companies they visited. We have alums in all of those companies. The alums come out and do meet and greets with these students. It's a fantastic networking opportunity to get students up to the Bay Area, students interested in tech, get them FaceTime with these employers. So that's just one of the many, many, many things that they do for our students. But yeah, we've seen really great results, for our international students this past year with internship opportunities. I mean, 100% of the class received an internship opportunity. Wow. So again, really fantastic resources that are provided through the school.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lindsay. And the fact that y'all are, the location itself, I'm sure also speaks with the tech giants all around you, with a lot of savvy digital companies also, which are around the school. So that is really helpful. I know we've sort of hit the time buzzer, but I am going to take a few questions if the panelists are okay with that for the next few minutes. Great, thank you. So Professor Abhishek, I want to take up this very interesting question that Jyoti has posted. And she's, according to Jyoti, urban planning is actually the need of the hour in India. And she wants to know how can, sort of learning at UCI, what are the kind of leadership opportunities which will be available to her on campus for building an AI which will sort of help her if she were to come back to India and help with urban planning projects as such, to implement them on a larger scale.
So I think I can offer some view, and then probably Jana and Lindsay can offer some perspective on this.
Right.
So, we work very closely. As you might know, Irvine is one of the planned cities in the US. It's owned primarily by the Irvine company. So it's, a lot of experimentation and a lot of design goes into how the city is planned. So, I think this is probably one of the places where you can learn a lot about how to design cities well. It's one of the best places to live, but I think it's also there's a lot of planning that goes into it. So I'm sure there are programs across campus that look at architecture and urban planning and whatnot. Uh, in terms of what we're doing at the school, we work very closely with the local governments. We are doing a project with, in fact, last year we did this project with uh, the company that installs EV charging stations. So not Teslas, but other EV charging stations, and trying to figure out where to plant or where to sort of provision these charging stations using AI and how to do pricing and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, so there's definitely opportunity that I see uh, currently at the school, but there are also other opportunities all across the board.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Prof. That was really helpful. And of course, Jyoti, you have sort of identified the right kind of problem that we are looking into today. Building on to, Jana, Lindsay, what we spoke about earlier, a student wants to know that after completing a 3-year degree program, if they were to do a diploma as such for 1 year, would that help them with their chances, or would you require them to do something else?
Yeah, I can take that. Yes, that does help. It has to be a 1-year like post-baccalaureate degree in the area that your undergraduate degree was in, or a related area. So yes, definitely that is going to be kind of that extra year that will help you meet that 4-year degree requirement. So yes.
Thank you. I'm going to take my last question for the evening today. And Professor, I will take this one for you, which is from Pranay, who wants to know, how do generative AI models learn and perpetuate biases? What role do training data and algorithms sort of play in this?
Right. So, the not only generative AI models, but generally any machine learning models are trained on data, right? And so there are multiple things that happen. One is the data might be biased, and
Right.
as a consequence, if you're learning from the data, the models are biased. So, for example, Amazon created an AI model to screen applicants,
Mm-hmm.
and predominantly what they saw was in the data that was so they built a model and they were using it for recruitment, and they were screening candidates based on that particular model. And what they realized after some time is the model was rejecting women candidates and
Oh,
only accepting men. And so they tried to find out why that was the case. And then when they went back and looked at the data, that was a bias that was there in their recruitment practices, right? So
Sort of learned
just
from that.
given that the data itself was biased, we had this bias that creeped into the final model. So this is, the data might be problematic, and that's why the bias creeps in. There might be other reasons, more mathematical reasons why the bias creeps in, right? So ultimately, what you're trying to do is, I'll get a little bit technical, you try to maximize the loss function, right? There's a prediction that the model
Mhm.
makes, and you're trying to sort of minimize the the difference between the prediction that the model is making with reality, right? And you're then averaging it across all the predictions that the model is making. So what might happen is there is a minority group in that data set that might be impacted negatively just because in the overall averaging of the loss function, they don't matter as much, right? So it's not like the data, even if the data is unbiased, this bias might still creep up, right? So there are many reasons that the bias might
Right.
occur, and we want to be, careful and make sure that we are able to remove these biases. I
Thank you.
think first, the awareness problem was there. Like people were not aware that
Yes.
these biases are there, but I think many people are talking about this, and
Hmm.
now we can come up with ways
Yeah.
to address it.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor. With that, I am going to sort of Lindsay, Jana, just one last question for you, if that's okay with y'all. Great, thank you. So Sharon wants to know, as a student looking to maximize her experience, what advice would you sort of give on how to make the most of the resources and the opportunity that the UCI provides both academically and professionally to students?
I love this question because I think you're here today. So that's like the first step, right? And I look at this as an investment in yourself, especially for full-time MBA and the MBA programs. So I mean, you're doing this for a reason, for that end goal, whatever it is. So when you're in the program, make the most of it. I mean, honestly, I know there are so many fantastic opportunities to get involved, whether it's in clubs and organizations. We have so many different clubs and organizations. Whether it's doing a case competition, we've had students compete nationally in case competitions. Those are great hands-on experiences for our students. We have an MSA, which is a board that oversees all of our clubs and organizations. There are just so many different things you can do. I always say, like, now's the time. I mean, you're committed to this program. You now, especially for full-time, I mean, you're not working, you're kind of taking a pause in your career to get you to the next step.
Mhm.
So uncover every stone that you would want to do and try something that's out of your comfort zone. I think that's really, really important. Maybe you came in with a goal of product
Yeah.
management, but maybe after, kind of taking a couple different classes, you're like, I never really thought a path for me would be marketing. I think it's really being open and kind of uncovering everything that you would want to do. I think students, I always ask, is there something you missed? And they're like, there was, like, I didn't go on the international residential, or something that they could have done. So definitely, yeah, I mean, make the most of it. We're here to support you. We have fantastic resources at the school. And yeah, I always say, just go all in, make the most of your experience.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lindsay. With that, I would now like to end the masterclass. A huge thank you to Professor Abhishek, Jana, Lindsay, all of you for all of the information and the inputs that you have provided. I am sure all of the students have also benefited from that. The three of you have also been kind enough to drop your email IDs and some links in the chat window. So we still have around close to 180 plus students. So all those of you who want to connect with them, please feel free to reach out to them. And I am sure they will all be able to help you. If you need anything from my end, reach out to us at Seed Global Education. And with that, thank you once again. It was an absolute pleasure having you, and I look forward to seeing you all soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.